I'm going to code a better version of ChatGPT in this video. ChatGPT sometimes doesn't answer the questions you want, or you want to build your own features or have a custom version of the AI. First, we'll rebuild the front end with the same general design, along with a chatting interface, so you can have your own personalized ChatGPT running at your own discretion. You'll also be able to create new chats as well as access all the models inside of OpenAI. This allows you to do more refined prompts, such as if you want a coding prompt, selecting a coding model will produce much better results than what ChatGPT would normally do. I don't have any sponsors, so I'm going to sponsor myself again in this video. I've put together an OpenAI Starter Kit, a template to build your own ideas on. It's built on top of the MERN stack, and it has everything ready to go for you to start interacting with OpenAI, building your own prompts and training the AI to essentially have outputs that you want. This should save you hundreds of hours, and I've listed it on Gumroad for $99. On top of that, I'm thinking that I'll also introduce a brand new template. This will be a ChatGPT Starter Kit, a template where you can customize it and configure it any way you want. It'll only take about 5 or 10 minutes to set up, and I've listed it on Gumroad if you want to try it out and support the channel. It'll be very similar to what we're doing in the video right now. It'll be just more expansive, saving you the time and effort from building it yourself. So without further ado, let's begin this video. Let me begin by creating the front end for the website. I'm going to start with Visual Studio Code. I've browsed into a folder here that I've created called ChatGPT-Enhanced. And I'm going to check my Node version. So I'm going to type in Node-V. I'm running version 18.12.1. I'm also going to check my NPM version, which is 8.19.2. I'm going to install Create React App. I'm going to do this by calling npx create react app, and then I'm going to create an app here called Enhance ChatGPT. Now, if we browse into the folder structure here, we'll see that we've got our folder here called Enhance-GPT. I want to change this to something more specific, so I'm going to call this client, since this is where our front end will exist. I'm going to also change the name here to something more like ChatGPT-client, and we'll also create one later for the server. We can actually initialize that already. So here in console, what I'm going to do to initialize that is simply type in npm init. Here we'll include ChatGPT server, and here is where we'll have our server later on. So we've got our server here in the root folder, and we've got a client which is with Create React App inside a folder called client. Next, we're going to cd into the client folder and run npm start, which will kick off the React server we can now customize. Jumping back into VS Code, we can expand out src, and we can head to app.js and start configuring the application look and style. We'll need a side menu and a main section. So let's start off with that. This side menu here, if we inspect it, is around 244 pixels wide. So we have a general idea of how to do that. We can do an side, I believe it is. It's an HTML attribute. And then over here, we can do a section. And for the side, I'm going to do a class name here. And for the class name, I'm going to call this side menu. Hit save on that. And we've got an app.css file here. So I'm going to browse into app.css. I'm going to pass in this class name for side menu. We'll select the width here to be 240 pixels. And I think that should be okay. The other thing here is we've got an app file, well, an app class, sorry. And I think this might be in the app CSS file. So here I'm going to do a display of flex for it. Hit save. I'm also going to move this side menu into the app CSS file so that it's all in one place. And here I'm going to do a border of 1 pixel solid white so we can see it. Let's head back to our React interface. And we've got our, well, side menu, and we've got our main menu here. Though it's a little bit large, but we can work on that. So what I'm going to do is make sure that we're not fully zoomed in. Now we're not, so it seems more reasonable as to its sizing. The other thing here is that this section here hasn't expanded out all the way. So what we can do here is for the section that we have here, I'm going to move the header and all of this code. I'm going to, well, remove it altogether. This section, I'm going to give a class a name of, I suppose, Chatbox. We're going to copy that class and paste it into here. We're going to give it a flex of 1, And we're also going to give it a border of 1 pixel solid white. So we should be able to see some separation, but we've lost the background colors here. So I'm going to grab the background color here we had earlier for the app header, and I'm going to put this in the app itself. So it can now be visible. The text though is still black. So I'm going to jump back into VS Code. I'm going to select the color of the text to be white. Finally, I sort of want this to utilize the whole space here inside of our area. So we could do this in a couple of ways, but I'm going to be lazy and position this to be absolute with a top of 0, bottom of 0, right of 0, and left of 0. If we hit save on that, we can see that it's utilizing the entire space now. Let's take a closer look at exactly what colors are currently being used. So if we do a check on that, we should be able to use the little cursor here, go to hexadecimal, and grab this color of 202123, I think it is. Let's jump back in here, and for the side menu, let's do the background color here to have that hexadecimal color. If we hit save on that, it should be a darker version for us now, which it is. And then on the right hand side, we have this VS Code looking color. So if I was just to try and figure out what that is, I can just do that little trick that I did before, where I can select the color here, palette, and it's a 3-4 color. So I'm going to also apply that here for the chat box. We'll do background color, and we can utilize the same color for that. So we're getting closer. There is a slight larger width to this side menu, which I'm not sure what that might be. It might be actually the margins, for all I know. So something I normally like to do when I'm building out an interface is to do a normalize. So I'm just going to type in normalize CSS, head over to the very first example that we get. We can install this and probably utilize it immediately, but this is the syntax that we would use for that. I'm going to jump back into VS Code, type in normal CSS, paste that in. And then over here in app.css, I'm going to import that normal.css. And it should make sure that things like border box and other stuff like that just work properly. Then for this side menu, I'm also going to expand out its width a little bit more. So let's head back here to side menu. Let's do its width to maybe 260 pixels and refresh that to make sure that it's more or less the same, and that looks much closer. Finally, I'm going to add some padding to it. Something like a 10 pixels should do, and I can remove the white borders now because we can see some separation between the two items. With the padding, I can see that it's actually a little bit too large now, so let me remove it back to 240, which really shouldn't happen if I'm using border box, but maybe it isn't applied properly, so let me double check that. I'll jump back into our React application here. Let's go to app.css. Normal.css is located here. Is it doing border box, content box? I believe that is correct, but maybe it's not. Let's go to border box CSS normalize. How to do border box in this, we have this just over here. So I'm going to copy this into the normalize script, and this just means that essentially if we're doing anything like adding padding, so say I add 40 padding to it, it's not going to suddenly be larger now, it's still the same size. This does mean that I do have to make it a little bit bigger once more, but I believe that should fix that problem that we're having, and the size is now correct. Moving on, we can close most of this out, and we can begin stylizing the left-hand side menu as well as the right-hand side chat interface. So for the left-hand side menu, I'm going to add some features and content in there, but mainly we just need this first button here to start a new chat. So that's the first thing I'm going to do. Let's remove this H1 block. And in here, I'm going to pass in, I think, just a regular div, and I'll call this the same thing, which is a new chat. Let's jump in here. We'll call it new chat. We'll put a class in here called, I suppose, side menu button, and hit save on that. And generally speaking, I have an idea of what it looks like in terms of the CSS, so we can pass it in here. We'll do something like padding 15 pixels, color is already set, so we don't need to do that. Border 1 pixel solid white, and border radius was about 5 pixels. Let's have a look. So that looks about the same. It almost has a little bit too much padding, maybe 12 pixels, but otherwise it also needs to have the little plus there. And I think that might be like a font awesome icon. I can't really tell. It is an SVG, but Font Awesome often does this quite well. I don't know if I want to go to the extent of importing Font Awesome icons, so I'll just leave it at that for the time being. But I will want to do the text align to be on the left-hand side. And I'll probably want to reduce that padding to 12 pixels. So now we have this new chat working quite well. Finally, I'm going to jump in here and I'm going to add in, well, I guess an icon, but I'll have the icon inside of a span. And this span will just have a plus sign. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do some styling for that span. We'll do side menu button spam, not spam, span. And here I'll do something like padding left can be 6 pixels, padding right can be maybe 12 pixels. And if we refresh that, we've got our little plus sign next to our newer chat. There is a hover effect that's happening where the background color is changing. So we should probably apply that. So we should do an on hover effect here. I'm going to grab the side menu. We'll do a hover. We'll do background color can be RGB 255, 255, 255, which is the color white, with 0.1 being 10% opacity. Hit save on that. And now when we hover over it, we can see that it has that animation. We could even go a step further and do a transition, ease 0.25 seconds on all styling. And then now we've got that little bit of a transition when we hover over it, similar to what we have over here. That's our first button. The only other thing here is that the text might seem a little bit smaller or larger, but I'm not going to go to that level of detail. I think that's enough to get us started. Now let's actually create this chat interface that we have over here on the right side. Let's begin with the most important thing, which is the little input at the very bottom of the screen here, as well as this text, which maybe we don't really need, but I think this input should be easy enough to make. The first thing we can do is grab the color that it's using, which is just this lighter shade of gray. It also has a bit of a box shadow and it's quite large and has a lot of padding. To do that, I'm going to pass in a new class here. I'm going to call this div class name. We'll call this the chat input holder. And for this, I'm going to also have probably maybe an input or a text area. Let's do a text area. And I suppose this can be called the chat input text area. And that should be enough for the basic design. But as you can see, it's sitting here at the very top of our screen. It's not really how we want it. We want it to be at the very bottom, sort of centered. So what I'm going to do is jump into our styling here. We're going to grab this class chat input holder. And first of all, we're going to update the color that we have over here. So for this color, actually, maybe we can do that in the text input. So let's actually grab the chat input text area and also put this class in over here. Now I've forgotten what color that was because I removed my copy pasta. Let me grab that again. It's a 404 color. So I've definitely found that. Let's go background color and we'll paste that in with a hex value. Let's make sure it's not changing opacity. So it's just got the cursor there. So if we refresh, now it's visible, but it still has a border and it's got no padding and stuff like that. So let's do width 100%. We'll do border, say 5 pixels again. We'll do border color, none. And I think that, oh, sorry, border radius here, 5 pixels and border none. So that way we don't even have to worry about the color. Hit save on that. So now we can see it's located over here. It has a bit of an outline when we select it, and it probably also needs a bit of a margin. So I'll do margin to be 12 pixels. And I'm also going to do outline to be none. Finally, we have the box shadow. So let's do box shadow here. I want it to be subtle, but let's do something like maybe 8 pixels. Oh, sorry, 0, 8 pixels, 4 pixels, 0 RGBA. We'll do black at 0.5 opacity. So hit refresh on that. That still might be a little bit heavy, and we've got a bit of an overflow happening because of the margin I applied. So instead, I'm going to apply that to its parent. I'm going to do 12 pixels here, and this over here, I'm going to set it to be just 0 pixels, 8. I always get box shadow confused. I think it has to be the first 2 values are 0 and the last one. Yep, so that looks like a much better box shadow. There's no padding inside the text box right now, so I'm going to add some padding inside of it. Let's do padding 12 pixels and check it now. So now it's getting closer. We also need to make sure that its color is white. So let's have a look at it now. It's much closer. And the font is a bit larger in this example, so I'm going to do font size 1.25 EM. So that should make it much larger in comparison to what we had here. And finally, it should be in a single line. I also wanted to only have one row, so I'm going to do rows is equal to 1. Let's refresh. Now it's starting to take shape. We don't have a button at the very end there, but I can figure that part out a little bit later. For the time being, I just want to have it point down here at the very bottom, and for it to have some more padding on the left and right hand side. So I'm going to jump back into VS Code here to our styling, and for the holder, I'm going to do a position of absolute. For this position, I'm going to put it to the bottom. We're going to do left is 0, right is 0. And then for the size, maybe 90% will work a little bit better. So here it is exactly at the bottom, but because we've got this, I suppose, not being defined inside of our other item, we need to add a relative to our other item here. I think it was in the chat box. Where was that? So chat box here, that needs a position of relative. And that way the actual absolute position here is now at the bottom of our text box. It probably needs a little bit less box shadow and some more padding from the bottom too. So what I'm going to do here is head over to this chat box holder, put 24 pixels for that, and halve the shadow. Now we're getting much closer to what we normally have in ChatGPT's chat interface. They don't have a placeholder here, so I'm going to also remove the placeholder so that it looks more closely resembling, well, the ChatGPT version. And I think we're pretty good there. I don't think I need to change that much more than what it is already. I'm not going to put in this whole ChatGPT preview or anything. We could write our own, but I'm pretty happy with what we have. We can now build out this main section here. I don't know how useful this could be, so in a way, I think I'll just skip that whole part, and we can move into creating the chat interface for ChatGPT now, which will be the fun part. Let me create a new div up here, and for this div, I'm going to give it a class name, and for this class name, I'm going to call this the chat log, which is a pretty good one. In here, I'm going to pass in a chat message, and this chat message will be, I suppose, having a couple of things. It's got the message itself and a small little avatar of me. So I think that should be easy enough to do. If we have a look, there is also a slight different color here when OpenAI sends a message back, but we can get to that shortly. So for that, I'm just going to do another div here. I'm going to pass this class name here as avatar. We can add an image in there later on, but for the time being, I'll leave that empty. Then in here, I'm going to pass in another one called message, and I'll close that off. And I think we can close off the chat log div over here. So we've got a message. This message has an avatar as well as a message generally. So chat message, avatar message. So this is me here that I'll put in, and this can be something like hello world. Let's hit save on that to see what it looks like for us here. It's all text centered and it doesn't look very good right now. So let's start customizing the CSS. I'm gonna jump here into chat log and I'm gonna start adding all these classes in. So we've got the chat log class, we've got the chat message class. We also have the avatar class over here. And we finally have the message class. Now normally you could nest this if you're using Sass or less, but for the time being, I'm just doing a simple design over here. Let's do a padding with a scroll happening here, and let's do a... Actually, no, I'll leave this as is. We'll just add in the padding. Then this one here can also have some more padding. 12 pixels should be enough. This can be a border. Now this can be a background of a white here for the avatar. Border radius can be, say, 50%. Width can be 40 pixels. I think that's a good amount. And height can also be 40 pixels. And finally, for the message, I'll leave that empty. For all of this, I want the text area, text align here to be left. So let's hit save on that. So that looks a little bit better. We also need to have a display of flex here. For the text message, I'm thinking to add in a little bit more padding on the left, so maybe something like 40 pixels, and on the right, 40 pixels. Let's refresh here, and I think, did I not add the display flex properly? I have to add it to message as well. So let's refresh. That's looking a little bit better. I haven't added the padding in properly, so let me do left, 40 pixels, padding right, 40 pixels. And what was a GitHub Copilot doing to me before by not providing me the right design for that? So that looks better. We'll also add some padding here to the text message itself. And finally, I'll remove the me from here. We'll add in an avatar later, but we've got a bit more of an interface happening now. Now, there is a few ways we could do this. This is one way with all the padding. The other way we could do this is by having just a little bit of padding, something like, say, 24 pixels, and then doing a max width here, and having that something like 480 pixels. Margin left is auto, and then margin right is auto. If we save that, it should be centered, which it is now. That looks much better. But this is because it's happening on the entire div element here on that chat message. So if we go console here, elements, we can see the chat message happening. We've got the avatar and the message. But if we were to add a background color like we have here, it wouldn't look good. So we actually have to nest this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to call this the chat message center. Close enough. And nest this all inside of that. So here I'm going to do chat message. Ooh, I've gone one layer too deep. Let's actually do it up here. Div class name equals chat message center. Great. And paste that in. So we've got our avatar and hello world. If we jump back in now, it essentially should work the same way. We'll need to update the display flex to exist inside of that instead of inside of the chat message, and even the padding. So let's actually move all of that below here. Hit save on that, refresh, and now it exists here. If, for example, we wanted it to be a lighter color, say background color, let's copy paste it here in the center message. I've lost it. Where did it go? Here it is. Hit save on that. we can see it's only applying just over here like that. So if we actually now move it one element up to the parent, it's essentially taking shape and applying to the whole side. So now we could even remove the padding that we're having on the parent above that, which is just over here, the chat log. Hit save on that. If we go back, we can see now it's utilizing the entire space, which is much better, at least for when we get to the ChatGPT interfaces. So the other thing I'm going to do now here is utilize the same message design, but I'm going to add in one more class here called Chat GPT. And I'm going to copy paste this and remove that class now. And then this guy here will be I am an AI. Hit save on that. So now we should have two messages. Both of them have, well, that background color, but they shouldn't, because we're going to update the CSS here to only add this background color if, for example, we have the class ChatGPT on here. Hit save on that, refresh, and we're getting closer to that sort of interface look. There is more width happening here. I think it's like 640 maybe. So let's update that to 640. Hit save on that, refresh. And yeah, that looks much better. Hello world. Great. So with that done, there is a slight different background color on this element here. So if we go color, red, grab this color value that we have here. It's a 444 color. I'm going to apply it to be the color that we want to use for ChatGPT's replies, because we want it to be more or less the same. So now we're getting closer. We've got this ChatGPT image here. This is actually like an SVG image inside of a green icon. So I'm going to copy that over too. So for the SVG, I could probably just have it here as an SVG. I think this is it, but because this is React code, that might not work. But at least for this ChatGPT interface for avatar, so where's avatar? Here it is. I'm gonna pass in one more value here, ChatGPT. We're gonna grab that nice green color that we're utilizing for the ChatGPT interface. That, if we did an inspect on it, let's see what color it is. Color, red. Select it just over here. That's a nice green color. And let's apply that for ourselves here. So I'm going to add the class here, ChatGPT. We'll head back. And now we've got a white and a green circle. We probably need to add some, well, avatars into there next. This here is using the OpenAI logo. So there's a little playground here where you can simply copy paste an SVG and out comes a React component. So I'm gonna copy paste that and paste it straight into here. Hit save on that, and if we go back to our design here, it has not defined prop. What's that? That's missing something. Props. So we can remove that. And we've got a nice little ChatGPT interface circle here. I personally prefer a circle for an avatar than a square. I think that looks better. With this done, I think we can move on to the backend now and building out the backend to essentially interact with OpenAI's latest API and start plugging messages in and getting responses right back. So let me head over here to the main folder and create a new file called index.js. We're going to include a few things here, but the main ones will start off with Express, because that's how we're going to be calling in, well, essentially API requests. So let me cd back a folder. Here I want to do npm install express cores and body parser. And I think I'll also get Morgan. I think that should kick us off, and OpenAI. Let's hit save on that, and that'll start installing. While that's happening in the background, let's log into the OpenAI website. Then we want to head over to our account, assuming you have an account. If you don't, just create one. I'm going to head over to Adrian and view API keys, and I'm going to create a new API key, which I'm going to use for this project and then delete later. Here, I'm going to paste it into my VS Code instance, which is just over here, and I'm going to set that a little bit later. Next up, I want to jump into OpenAI's documentation and head over to the API. We're going to head over to Introduction, and here we're going to install OpenAI, which we just did. And we're going to start adding it to our Node JS project by copying this code just over here. So this code essentially is doing a few things. It's requiring the configuration from OpenAI. It's setting the configuration with the organization. And here where we have the API key, I'm going to paste it in. You'd want to do this with an environmental key, but for the time being, this is just for testing purposes. I'll remove this list engines response. We can have a look at this later, but I'll comment it out for the time being and hit save on that. Then we're going to prep up a completion. Now we're going to use a Node.js here with DaVinci, and I'm just going to copy this text over here to complete that and paste it here in below. So what's happening here is we're essentially resetting OpenAI. So we don't need to reset that configuration since we've already done that, and we can get rid of most of this other stuff that we have here. The only difference here is it's using a require instead of an import. So I'm actually going to use the require because I'm not sure if I've set imports just yet on this. So let's hit save on that. We can close this off, and we have most of our configuration now done. Now for creating the API here on the back end. Let's test this out. I'm gonna do an async function here called call API, and I'm gonna just paste this piece of code in. What we're doing here is an await. So what we can now do is a console log, and we want to console log out, well, the data that comes back. I think then finally we just need to call this function as the last thing that we do here before we test everything is working. So let me do a node index call, and here we're calling index. We've called say this is a test, and then OpenAI has come back, this is indeed a test, which means that we're talking to the API here from OpenAI. All right, with that done, we can now create an API. So what I'm going to do is say create a simple express API that calls the function. So we're going to require express, we're going to create the app, we're going to set a port, then we're going to do an app get, send hello world, we're going to do a listen, and we're going to do a console log, which I don't think it is. So what's happening here is, well, GitHub Copilot hasn't done exactly what I wanted it to do, but that's okay. So I'm going to move this import for Express here at the very top. Then I'm going to move this function here, get rid of the function, and just paste it into the GET request. I'm going to change the GET request to a POST request here, and I'm also going to make sure that it's async. Then I'm going to have a response that will be a JSON response. And I suppose the data that comes back will be the response data from OpenAI. I think that is pretty much it. Let's hit save on that and do in node index. We're now listening to app listen here on this port, which it should be working, and we should now allow the front end to query this data and pull this in. So it's time to jump back into React to create an API layer. To start off with, we'll change the port here to 3080 for the server because port 3000 is usually where we use React. Then here over React, I'm gonna turn this into an input just to make submitting a little bit easier. I'm gonna add a form to be wrapped around it, which will have an onSubmit, and the onSubmit can handle submit. Let's save that and scroll up here and make a function here called onSubmit or handle submit, sorry. And we'll make this as an async function. So this will prevent default. How do we do the E? I think we just pass in an E over here. And then we'll do E dot prevent default. which I'm pretty sure is how we do that. So that'll just prevent the default behavior of it, I suppose, doing a submit. When you do a submit, it usually does a page reload. So let's refresh that, hit enter, open up the debugging tools, and here we have a submit in console, which is perfect. That's what we want. With that done, we want to have some state. So let's actually import set state, and that should be just import set state from React. Then here we're gonna add state for input and chat log, and GitHub Copilot should just create that for us, which it has. Then for the input, I'm gonna scroll down here to the input. I'm gonna set the value here to be the input. On change can be a function that basically sets the state, so of input to equal input, but we're gonna call set input to equal input. And it's not actually gonna equal input, it's gonna equal e.target.value. So that way we've got our input here being set. Now we've just got our chat log. So what I want to happen here is when we do a submission, we want the input to be set to nothing. So we'll do set input here to be nothing. We also want to grab the input and add it to a chat log. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do set chat log to equal chat log plus input. But for that input, I actually want this to have the, I suppose, user to be me. Fair enough. And then the message to have that chat log in here. Well, the message that we're sending. So we'll reset that, and I think that should be good. So let's hit save on that. Then for the chat log here, I'm gonna essentially turn this into a component, I think. Let's see how we would do that. So here we've got a chat message. We're gonna call this a chat message as a component. And then we'll do message can equal message, which we'll pass to it very shortly. Here at the bottom, I'm going to do a const message or chat message. It can pass in message. It'll have a return. I'm going to paste this guy back in here and close this all off. Then message can be that, and then message.user could be later in here, but I suppose I'm just gonna apply it in here as a check. So what I'm gonna do is pass an avatar, and then if message.user is equal to GPT, then we also pass in Chat GPT into the avatar. We could probably do something similar here for the message itself, because if we have, what was it? If we have that background color happening, then we can pass in this class ChatGPT, which makes it have that background color. Beautiful. So with that done, I think that's one example of it. We are missing this one here, the SVG that we had earlier. So I'm going to close that off and put it in here as a check. So if message.user is equal to GPT, and we pass in this SVG. Wonderful. Hit save on that. We still have a bit of a problem. Set input is equal to input is coming up with a compile error. Shouldn't be. Left hand assignment. So let's scroll down here and have a look what's happening. So here is a set input, but this is a value that is here, set input. So it should just work. On change, set input. Yeah, I think because we're putting input in there. Let's close that off. Hit save. That should fix it up. So message is not defined and E is not defined. Interesting, interesting. So handle submit. That's fine. E.prevent default. E is here. Should work. And what was the other message here that we had? Message is not defined on line 28. Well, yeah, of course it's not. I haven't done that yet. Okay. So here I'm gonna do, I suppose, a few things. First, I'll create a draft message. User can be GPT, and message can be, how can I help you today? Question mark. So now we've got message, I'm pretty sure, because we also need to loop through that. So here where we have our first message, chat message, we're gonna do this. Oh, we don't need to do this. We just do chat log. We loop through it and we close that off. We probably also need a key. So I'm gonna do the key to be the index for the time being. We'll refresh that. So now we only have the E as not defined on line 50. So where's line 50? Ah, yeah, E has to be in here. Okay, I think that should cover it. So we've got our first message, how can we help you today? We can remove the rest of this last chat message that we had. And we could even set up another example here, just to make sure that these messages are showing up properly. Here it's going to be me. I want to use Chat GPT today. Hit save. And we've got our first functioning message happening from our array inside of React, which is great. Now we just populate this array with the API. So what I'm going to do is a fetch request to the API, combining the chat log array of messages and sending it as a message to localhost 3000 as a post. So here we're going to do an await fetch as a post with the headers, content type JSON. We're going to stringify that. We're going to pass in our chat log, looping through our messages, and that is pretty much it. And then we're going to get a response back, and we'll console log that response. For the time being, at least. Now this all looks correct. This stuff here is the main thing, the message that we're sending over to the API is what I really want to test out. So I'm going to save that. And then over here on the API, we should get a const, and this will be the message from the body. I'm actually going to sort of comment everything else out here. And for the data, I'm just going to pass back the message that we currently get, just as a test. And this console log here, I actually want to console out the message. So let's do that. We're going to open up the console here, go to React, oh, actually we need to reboot the server first of all. So let's jump back into the server, which I don't know if is even running. Let's do node index. This actually has to be coming up. All right, so it's listening on port 3080. For the API, we didn't add a port 80 here, 3080. So let's hit save on that. We'll go testing here, enter. We do get our new message here instead of Chat GPT, or the one that we're building anyway. But if we go back here, in our client, we're not getting a console log happening. So let's see why that is. So we definitely did a app post request, but if we go here, we can see that cores is probably not enabled. So we need to enable cores, which allows us to send messages to and from different ports and domains. So to do that, I'm just going to ask Chat can you please add cores to Express? And we're just gonna do that over here. Is it adding it? And body parser. So I'm gonna just paste this in. Add body parser and cores to Express. So here's body parser. We're gonna import it. We're gonna import cores. And then here under app, we're gonna add body parser, JSON, and cores. And that should pretty much cover that, which is really cool because GitHub Copilot, you can see the benefit of how it works here, where it just does a lot of the things you're asking for, where you could normally type it out if you know what you're doing. So let's do a test, hit enter. This time in console, we've got back a message, which is the data, how can I help you today? Which is actually the combination of our messages. And here we have that all in one big message, which is perfect. It's what we want. So this means our messages are getting over to the API we've created. And now we can start using them. So here we have Chat GPT. We've got the prompt that we created, but I'm going to pass in our message. And this is the message that we want. Here for max tokens, I'm gonna do something like 100, and temperature can be 0.5. We're gonna get a response back here, and this will be the text response, and I'm gonna paste this straight into the data. But rather than calling this data, I'm gonna call this message and hit save on that. Here on the app now, we're gonna get a response that'll be called data, and data.message will be our message. So realistically, all we have to do now is add it to our chat log. So let's go down here to our chat log. Let's do a set chat log. We're gonna set it to be the chat log, but the user now will be GPT. The message will be the data.message that we'll get back. And that's it. I believe now it should just be working. So let me restart the server here. I'm just restarting it manually, node index.js. We'll refresh here. What can you do for me today? Hit enter. And we should get a response back. ChatGPT is an AI-powered chatbot. Wow, that is working now. With that done, let's actually create the clear button. So clear chats, I suppose, or chat logs. We can do function clear chat. And then in here, we'll do set state of chat log to be, well, nothing. And then let's jump down here to the side menu that we have. I think it's just, where did we put the side menu? Here it is. We'll do an on click and we'll just pass in that function. So now if we go new chat, it empties everything out, which is perfect. Then on top of that, we want to do a couple of things here. For these messages, we're doing quite a few set states. So I'm gonna do a wait on each one of them, simply because if you do them out of order, it might actually have some complications, I've noticed. So I'm just gonna save that. So now we're gonna refresh and then say, this is a test, reply success if it worked. Hit enter. Let's see if ChatGPT comes back with a success. So it has come back with some weird stuff. Let's actually have a look at what's happening on the back end here. So if we go to the console here, it actually does say, how can I help you today? I want ChatGPT today. Index. We have no more console logs. So what I'm thinking is that something has gone haywire during this process. So I'm going to console log out the message once more and call this message. And then on top of that, I'm also going to console log out in here what this is. So these are const messages is equal to, well, essentially this chat log. And we'll pass that back in here as messages. So essentially we're looping through the messages after we've set them. We're joining them together. I think I'm gonna do a -n here so that it does a line break. And then we're going to send them across. hit save on that, go to the client here, restart the client for Node JS, and go refresh. So are you working? Here's our first one. So we've got a response back, but it's overridden our other chat. But let's have a look at what's happening here on our server. So I had a bit of an issue here where these things are happening out of order. So I'm going to fix this up a little bit. First, what I'm going to do is over here, I'm going to set the chat log here as a variable, const chat log new. And I'm actually going to do that as a let. And that can equal, and I'll do this as an array. And that can be the chat log itself plus this extra one that we're essentially creating now. I'm going to set the input to be nothing. And then after that, I'm going to use this chat log here to create the new messages. So messages I can just have as a word, messages. Beautiful. And then that will be based on the new chat log. That'll pass in here, and then finally we'll get our data, and our data can be based on our original chat log new, which is just over here, plus the new message that we get back from the server, and then we're going to set that all. Let's hit save on that and refresh. Let's go back here. Chat log is not defined, so I am not calling or referencing the proper one here. It should be called with a capital L. So that is my bad. Let's hit save on that. We'll go back and go testing, enter. So that is now waiting for ChatGPT to respond, and then it's updating in here, as you can see. So with that being a better structure, we can actually go back in here, go to set state. We could probably just paste it in here like that. So that can be the new chat log. And then let's jump back in here, refresh, test. We get test popping up immediately. And then we get our message here from ChatGPT. Perfect. All right, so let's do a new chat. This time I want you to pretend to be Steve Jobs. Enter. So let's see what comes back. This should be a completely plain thing. Hello there, my name is Steve Jobs. What are your tips to help me start a new business? So I assume it'll reply as Steve Jobs here, but have a clear vision and message. Know what you want. Yeah. So this is now a completely vanilla version of, well, almost like ChatGPT and almost like an interface for OpenAI's Playground, but in a chat-like interface. So let's see how we can now customize this and add features and some of the things that you might not normally be able to do inside of here. So the very first one is let's actually jump into, I suppose, the interface here on our backend server. And previously we had this thing here where OpenAI gave us a list of engines we could use. I'm going to create an actual API route here called get, and then I suppose engines, or maybe models. Models might be better. And what I want to do here is grab what models are being sent over from OpenAI and then send them back to the front end as models we can start using for talking to ChatGPT. So if we go to OpenAI's options over here, if we go to, I think, the introduction, and we have a look, where was it? Was it in introduction under API? Yep, there it is. Here is that first one to grab the list of engines. I'm going to grab that piece of text over here, and I'm going to throw this in here, and then I'm going to do a JSON or response as a JSON, and we're going to pass that response in here, which I assume will be the list of engines, but I assume that'll be data. So engines, oh sorry, models, response.data. So let's hit save on that. We'll restart Node, and this is /models. So here in our app, what we're going to do is create a new function, get engines, And this will just be a simple API request, which apparently is already filled out. That's very impressive. Even with the right port and the right data, I'm kind of scared how ChatGPT just did that, or at least GitHub Copilot. We need a button to call this, but realistically, I just want this to call as soon as we launch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do, let's do a use effect run once when app loads. So we'll need to import use effect. And then in here, let's place it in. Use effect, list engines, stop. Fair enough. Hit save on that. And then we've got a huge object thing that we've come back here from the server anyway. This is under data, data, data. Okay, so maybe data.data is what we need. Data.data.data. Refresh. But anyway, we'll jump back in here. We'll open up the tools and let's see what objects we get back. So we've got our models back here, and there's quite a few different models to choose from, but it's called models.data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new item in here as a set state, a new variable that we're going to save. And these will be called models. Set models. And then for our models, we want that to be an array. And here, when we get the engines and the data, and I think, what were they called? They were called models data. So we're going to call models data from there. Models data. And we're going to set them in here. Great. Then I want to loop them out. I want to loop them out just here in the sidebar as divs. So let's do a div class name equals models. Then I'm going to do a select, and then option is models. I think GitHub Copilot is already predicting what I want to do here, and it's even filled it out. Let's see if this actually even works. So yes, it has worked, but it doesn't list them properly in terms of their values. So I'm going to scroll back up here. I'm going to console log these out as well so I can see what they look like. Let's put that here in curly braces so we can run more than one command. Console log models. This is what our model looks like. We have an engine, an object, an ID. I think the ID is the name of it. So I'm going to use that to list it out. So here in our select, the key can be the ID and the model. Oh, models, model ID, model name. Ah, that's where it went wrong. All right, so model ID can be here too. So let's refresh. Now we've got all our models here on the left-hand side in a nice select. So we can select what kind of model we want to use. And this is just a list of models. Right now, I believe we were probably using DaVinci, but we could probably use, say, code, and then we can chat with the code version of ChatGPT, which would be way better than just the regular version. So let's see how we can do that. So what we're going to do here is we're going to also create one more set current model, and then we'll do current model here. And we'll set this as a text of, say, ADA or something like that. Or ADA, I think it's properly pronounced. Then set current model will be changing when we do a change on the select. So let's go to select on change. Let's do E. And we'll pass in set model to equal e target value, and this will have the value of current model updated. Then here under the request that we're doing, where we're sending in a message, I'm going to pass in current model as well. For current model, I'm going to pull that out of the post request here under request body, and I'm going to place it here in the models. So instead of text DaVinci 003, let's comment that out. And instead, we're going to pass in current model. Hit save on that. And now let's jump back into here. And the other thing we need to do is probably set the current model, but let's do, say, what model should we do? A code model, code DaVinci edit. Fix var log equal test. Let's see what comes back. So that's come back with not exactly what I was looking for, but in terms of what it should be doing, I think we need to clear out the chat, then go, what are you? And let's have a look. I'm doing a project. I'm working on a project. All right, well, I think we'll have to jump into the server here and check what we're applying to and what the current model is. So I'll do a console.log. I'll do current model is current model. Hit save on that. And then after that, I'm going to do a new request. But first I have to refresh this. It's because we didn't reboot Node, I think. But let's try this out. So we'll do a new chat. We'll use coding prompt. So the coding prompt, code crushman. Fix the code var equals testing. Let's see what comes back. So now we've got pure code coming back from Crushman. So this is what we got back. But now let's do a new chat, and this time we'll do adder. Paste this in, and we'll probably get some nonsense. Yep, because it's just not a coding example. So now we've got a new chat, and we've also had an option here for changing the engine that we're using for ChatGPT, which is very cool. This should give you enough of an idea of how to build your own version of ChatGPT. On top of that, I've continued to build this out, and I've added it in the link in the description. You can buy it for $50 if you don't want to have to put it yourself together. This supports the channel and it supports me. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, leave a like, hit subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Thank you.